All right, let's talk about your warm-up. So number 1 says, in the figure at the right, ray BD bisects angle ABC. Find the measure of angle ABD and the measure of angle DBC. So I'm looking for ABD, then I'm looking for DBC. When you see an angle measure next to a mark like this, that means that entire big angle has that measure. So if the whole thing is 154 and I'm looking for the two smaller halves, and I know that it's being bisected, so they must be equal to one another, what would they each have to be? The whole thing's 154. What would it be? Yeah, you just take 154 and you divide it by 2. 77. Good. Both of these small angles must be 77 degrees. Very good. So in number 1, they give us the big angle. They ask us for the two smaller angles. Since it's being bisected, we know the two smaller angles are congruent, and they would add up to 154, so they must both be 77. Sorry, I can't quite talk today. All right, the other one is kind of a different setup. We still have an angle that's being bisected by a ray. In this case, it's ray HL. We are asked for the measure of GHL. GHL is this little one. But then we're asked for the measure of GHJ, which is the big one. So, any ideas? Yes, ma'am? 120 what? 128. Yep, 128. Good. So the little one has to be congruent to the other little one that we were just given. So the measure of GHL has to be 64. Since the big angle is bisected, the two smaller angles that are formed are congruent. So if one's 64 degrees, the other one's 64 degrees. And then to find that big guy, you just add 64 and 64, which is 128. What are your questions on part 2 or problem 2? All right, we're still talking about bisectors in 3 and 4. This ray bisects angle PQR. So what do we know about these measures? They have to be the same or equal to one another. So I'm going to do 32 equals 5x minus 3. How would I solve for x? Good. Add 3 to both sides. You're going to get 35 equals 5x. Then what? Divide both sides by 5. Good. So what's x going to equal in part 3? 7. Very good. Now my icon's kind of ruining problem number 4 for you, so if you didn't get it down already, I'll just fill in what it says under that little Doceri icon up there. The left side is 9y. Just kind of gave away the answer there. The other one is 8y plus 10, and I know that this ray is a bisector. So what do I know about those two sides of that angle? They are the same. So I can do 9y equals 8y plus 10. How would I find the y here? Yeah, subtract 8y from both sides. Good. This is where that line of equality will help you out a lot. You'll notice that the y's are on opposite sides of the equal sign. To get them together, since the 8y is positive, we can subtract it from both sides. 9y minus 8y is 1y, or just y, equals, and all you have left on the right is 10. So y equals 10. Any questions on today's warm-up? Very good review of what we learned last week. Questions? Anyone need more time with the warm-up? All right, I'm going to come around and collect those warm-ups, so make sure they're at the corner of your desk with your name on it. And then take a couple minutes to get organized. So you need to make sure here you have the section number, the section title, and the objective. Like I said a minute ago, you do have a notebook quiz next week, so it's definitely time to make sure your notes are in order. And if they're not, to get them in order over the next couple school days. So today we are doing 2.3. Like I said, it is the only notes we're taking this week, so it's kind of a lot. Just bear with me. Make sure you get it all in your notes. And like I said, only day of notes, so this should be enough to get you ready for that quiz coming up on Friday. Today what we're learning about is complementary and supplementary angles. Your objective is to find the measure of complementary and supplementary angles. Any questions before we get going? All right, here's some vocab for you. I know it's a lot. I'll give you some time to get it all down. After everyone has these written, we'll talk about them. So take some time, get them in your notes, make sure you can read them, and we'll talk when everyone's ready. So your first vocab word today is complementary angles. That's two angles whose measures have a sum. What does the word sum mean? Addition. So two angles, when you add them together, you get 90 degrees. Each angle is the complement of the other. So if I say two angles are complements, you know that when you add them together, you should get 90. Alright, supplementary angles, it's the same basic idea, except now they're adding to 180 instead of 90. And then if you hear me say that two angles are supplements of one another, that means that when you add them together, you get 180. So supplementary angles, you call them supplements of one another. A lot of students have a hard time telling those two apart. Does complementary add to 90 or 180? I just can't remember. I always like to think about it in alphabetical order. Which comes first in alphabetical order, complementary or supplementary? C or S? C, okay? So the one that starts with a C, that's the smaller one. That's the 90. And then the one that starts with the S, the one that would be last in alphabetical order, that's the bigger one. That's the 180. So if that helps you, great. If not, try to think of your own memory trick so that you can tell those apart. Which one adds to 90, which one adds to 180. Any questions on the first two vocab words? All right, the next one is adjacent angles. Two angles that have a common vertex and a common side are called adjacent angles. So basically two angles that are right next to each other. So I just drew adjacent angles. Because of this common ray in the middle, they're adjacent angles. So they have the same vertex and they share a side. And then a theorem is a true statement that follows from other true statements. So you'll hear me say theorem today. You'll learn two theorems. Basically, a theorem is just a true statement. If I tell you something is a theorem, just assume that it's true. What are your questions on these four vocab words? All right, next you have two theorems. I'm going to shorten this up for you just a little bit. I just want you to write the words. You don't have to write all that measure stuff. We're actually going to write that out when we get to an example. So just write down what you see in the purple boxes. Again, I'll give you some time to do some writing and then we'll chat about it. Then we'll move on. Like I said, today's kind of a long lesson. We do have 6 examples after all this vocab and theorems and stuff. So just Be ready for lots of writing. So the first theorem is called the congruent complements theorem. This says that if two angles are complementary to the same angle, then they must be congruent. So I told you didn't have to write down the part that follows that, but I do just want to look at that for a second. So basically, if angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 gives you 90, and the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 3 also gives you 90, angle 1 and angle 3 must be congruent. They must be the same thing. Now, that sounds like a lot. Someone give me a measure between 0 and 90. Throw something out. 43. Okay, so if this one is 43, and the measure of angle 2 is also 43, what do 1 and 3 both have to be? What would you add to 43 to get 90? 47. Anyone getting 47? Anyone awake? All right, let's pick an easier one. What if angle 2 was 10 both times? What do 1 and 3 both have to be?
20.
What would you add to 10 to get 90? 80. So 1 and 3 would both have to be 80. Well, let's say that angle 2 was now 20. What would angle 1 and angle 3 both have to be? 70. Okay, so you can see that as you change the measure of angle 2, no matter what you make the measure of angle 2, angle 1 and angle 3 have to be congruent to each other. Okay? It also works when they add to 180. So here we have the measure of angle 4 plus the measure of angle 5 is 180. The measure of angle 5 plus the measure of angle 6 is 180. So let's say angle 5 is 80 in both of these equations. What do 4 and 6 both have to be? What would you add to 80 to get 180? 100. They both have to be 100. Good, okay? If you changed it to 90 instead, angle 5 is 90, then angle 4 and angle 6 must both be 90 as well, right? If you changed angle 5 to be 100, well, now the other two have to be 80. So no matter what you make angle 5, angle 4 and angle 6 are going to be the same thing. We will look at another example because these are kind of tricky. Do you guys have any questions, though, on this idea? All right, let's start getting into examples for today. Here is example 1. You do not have to write out all the wording at the top, the directions. The directions will be pretty clear after we finish each problem. But I do want you to draw the angles. So for A, just draw a 30 degree, 20 degree. They don't have to be exact. They're just quick sketches. Draw the 2 angles for B, and then draw the 2 angles for C. And the directions here say to decide whether the complementary angles, supplementary angles, or neither. Complementary angles add to what? Oh, it was just a mistake. Chill. Just takes a second. Complementary angles add to what? 90. Good. So if the 2 angles add to 90, we're going to call them complementary. Supplementary angles add to what? 180. So if the 2 angles add to give us 180, we're going to call them supplementary. And then any number besides 90 and 180, we're going to say neither. So I'm going to start A by adding 30 and 20. What does that give me? 50. Is there anything special about two angles that add to 50? Nope, this is a neither. Any questions? Part B, I'm going to add them together. 60 and 20. Gives me what? 180. When they add to 180, what do we call them? Supplementary angles. Good. And the last one, we're going to add them together. 70 and 20 gives me 90. When they add to 90, what do we call them? Complementary. Good. Wonderful. What are your questions on example 1? Now, if you want to shorten these, write SUP period or COMP period. I am absolutely fine with that. Give me a little more than S and C, though. That's a little too much of a shortcut. Give me at least 3 letters. What are your questions? Are we done with these? Okay. Here's number 2. Again, you can skip the directions. It'll be pretty clear what we're doing once you see our answers. As you are drawing these, label it as I'm labeling it on the board. So 1 and 2 are right next to each other. 3 and 4 have an angle in between. And then it appears that 5 and 6 are both right angles. But again, we can't really assume that if the box isn't drawn inside there. And then we are just determining if they're adjacent or non-adjacent. Adjacent was one of your vocabulary words. In order to be adjacent, they have to have the same vertex and they share a side. Bless you. So we're talking about the numbered angles. So on part A, here's 1, here's 2. Do they have a common side? Yeah, this guy right here is the side for both 1 and 2, and they have the same vertex. Their vertex is down here. So 1 and 2 are adjacent angles. All right, let's take a look at part B. Here is 3. Here is 4. Do they share a side? They share a vertex, I'll give you that much, but do they share a side? No, so these are non-adjacent. And part C, there's 5, there's 6. Do they share a vertex or a side? No, they don't really share anything, right? They look like they're probably congruent. They probably have the same measure, but do they share any parts? No, they're totally separate. So these are also non-adjacent. So again, they have to share a side and a vertex. What are your questions on number 2? We got 6 examples, so we still got some stuff to get through. All right, here's number 3 and number 4. Go ahead and write those down. All right, so in number 3, we're told that two angles are complements. When they're complements, they should add to what? 90. All right, I'm going to call the measure of angle F, F. I'm going to call the measure of angle G, G. When I add F and G together, I should get 90. Good. Some people prefer writing equations. Some people like to just do these in their head. So I am given the measure of angle F already. It's 23. I'm basically trying to figure out what I would add to 23 to get 90. The way you would do that is just 90 minus 23. What's the measure of angle G have to be? 57. Good. 67. You tricked me. That's a 6. Sorry. Kind of ugly. So the measure of angle G is 67 degrees. And again, you can double check by just typing in your calculator 23 plus 67. You should get 90 because they are complementary angles. Same basic idea on the next one, except now they're adding to what? 180. So I'm going to call the measure of angle S just S. I'm going to call the measure of angle T just T. Those should add to give me 180. I'm given S already. 95 plus what would give me 180? Anybody know what the measure of angle T has to be? 85 degrees. Very good. And again, the easy way to do that is just to take 180 minus what you already have, the 95, and see what you get. What are your questions? We've got 2 more examples, so we're getting there. All right, I don't want you to write any of this down. I'm going to tell you exactly what I want you to write. So the first thing that it says is angle 1 and angle 3 are complementary. So what do I know about the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 3? It should give us 90 degrees. Good. What I just wrote in purple is what I want you to write in your notes. That's an M there. Sorry, it got kind of... Let me fix that. Just that. Just what's in purple. You don't need the whole problem. So I got what's in purple from this statement right here. The measure of angle 1 and the measure of angle 3 must add to 90 because it tells me that they're complementary angles. Now, if you read on, it also tells you that angle 3 and angle 5 are complementary angles. So I know if I take the measure of angle 3 and I add it to the measure of angle 5, I should also get 90. So let's say that angle 3 was 40 degrees. What would 1 and 5 have to be? What would you add to 40 to get 90? 50. So 1 and 5 would both be 50. What if I told you that the measure of angle 3 was 10? What would you tell me the other ones were? 80. What if I told you the measure of angle 3 was 70? What would you tell me about 1 and 5? They're both 20. So what do you know about angle 1 and angle 5? They're always... First you told me they were going to be 10, then you told me they were both going to be 50, then you told me they were both going to be 80. They're always congruent. Somebody said it. Good. So if they are both supplementary angles to angle 3, they must be congruent to one another. No matter what you put in for angle 3, angle 1 and 5 are going to be the same thing. Kind of a tricky idea. It helps if you put examples in. Think of different measures for angle 3. You'll start to notice that 1 and 5 are always going to have to be the same thing if they're going to add to 90. What are your questions? All right, and here is the last example of the day. So I want you guys to go ahead and draw those. I'll give you a minute. And then our goal in both of these is to find the value for x. So in part 1, you can see that these two angles form what kind of angle when you put them together? Someone said it. A straight angle, right? Straight angles measure what? 180 degrees. So when you take 2x and you add 50 to it, you should get 180. So I'm going to write that equation. I'm going to solve for x. I'm going to undo the adding 50 by subtracting 50 from both sides. That gives me 2x equals 130. To undo multiplying by 2, I'm going to divide both sides by 2, and I get that x is 65 degrees. Any questions on number 6, part A? Number 6, part B. I see this little box. What does the box mean? 90. So when I take x and I add 2x to it, when I put those angles together, I should get a 90-degree angle. Now, I have x's on both sides, or sorry, I have x's on the same side of the equal sign. So what can I do with them? I can combine them. What's 1x plus 2x? 3x. Good. You don't have to do any fancy tricks to get them together. They're already together, so add them together. Now you want to get rid of that 3 as your coefficient, that multiplying by 3. When you divide both sides by 3, you come up with 30. Whoops. That little emblem is always messing me up. There you go. Alright, as you're finishing those up, I'm going to hand you your homework. We're going to do a few of them together, so make sure you keep them out. All right, everyone have a homework. Everyone done with example 6? Okay, I want to talk about the first 4 from your homework. So the directions say, decide whether this is true or false. If the statement is false, reword the statement so that the statement is true. Number 1 says, 2 angles are complementary if the sum of their measures is 180. Is that true or false? False. What could you change in order to make this true? I was actually going to go the other way with it. Our complementary angle should add to what? 90. Good. So I'm going to change the 180 to a 90. Or, like a few people were saying, if you want to take the word complementary out and change it to supplementary, that would be fine too. The only reason I didn't do that was because look at number 2. Then they'd be the exact same, which is fine. Number 2 reads, 2 angles are supplementary if the sum of their measures is 180. True or false? True. Good. So if you want to make one look just like number 2, since number 2 is true, that's fine. Or you can change the 180 to 90. All right, number 3 says 2 angles are adjacent if they share a common vertex. Is that true or false? That's false. They have to have a common vertex and a common what? Side. Good. You guys were listening today. I like it. So just a common vertex is not enough. It's kind of like part B on that example we did where we said adjacent, non-adjacent. They have to have the same vertex and a common side. And then number 4 says a theorem is a true statement that follows from other true statements. That is, of course, true. So false, true, false, true. Make sure you fix the falses. All right, don't put that away quite yet. I think you guys can handle 5 through 13, but 14 gets a little tricky. So everybody jump down to 14 real quick. It says, use the diagram to complete the statement. Angle 1 and blank are supplementary angles. So which one's supplementary with 1? 1 and 3 form a straight line? 1 and what form a straight line? 2. So, angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary angles. Number 15 reads, angle 3 and angle blank are supplementary angles. They have to form a straight line to be supplementary. That's the only way they're going to add to 180. So that one's also angle 2. Number 1 and angle 2 are supplementary. Angle 3 and angle 2 are supplementary. So which ones are congruent? 1 and 3. Good. So again, kind of tricky, but if you talk it out, it's not too bad. So on the board, you have 7 answers for your homework. You are responsible for the other 10, and that is due at the beginning of class tomorrow. Any questions?